everybody, and welcome to this very special episode of Blood Matters, a podcast for nurses. I'm your host, Emma Chalmers, and as usual, I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Michelle. Good morning, Michelle. How are you?
Hi Emma, how are you?
I'm all right. I'm all right. It's sunny in Scotland, so we're okay.
Rainy in London?
Rainy in London. Don't get the same weather in one country, do we?
No.
So this is a special episode, isn't it, Michelle? We're gonna talk a little bit about how nurses can write abstracts. We're gonna bring some special guests in because very shortly we'll be opening up the abstract submission profile for people to submit for the EBMT annual meeting in 2024. So a little bit different this time, but a special and interesting topic. We've had some feedback from nurses saying they don't necessarily feel confident and comfortable in writing an abstract. It's something that's new and they're not very used to doing. So we thought we'd bring in some guests for you guys so that we can help you to write the best abstract that you can so you could submit it for us at the end of the year and hopefully get it approved for annual meeting. So that's going to be great, isn't it, Michelle?
Yeah, I think so. We get quite a lot of feedback from nurses around sort of the mysteries around writing abstracts. And, it's not that complicated if you've done it before, but if you're a complete novice, then it's feels like an impossible task to get started. And there's a real buzz that people get from being able to summarize and then hopefully present their own work. So we really want to be able to utilize this episode of the podcast to support people who might have submitted before but still have questions. Everybody always has something to learn, don't they? Even if you're new to the area. But also thinking about those nurses who might be less experienced and would really, really like to be on the stage presenting their work in Glasgow in 2024, or might just be interested in writing an abstract for another meeting, or thinking about how they might even put a paper together, and again starting with an abstract, summarizing your own work in a small number of words is a good place to start. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this episode, and hopefully it will help people to improve or grow their skills in this. And also, maybe think about areas where they might get support with abstract writing as well. So yeah. So I guess we should probably introduce our guests.
Yeah, I think we should. So we've got a repeat guest for the first time actually, haven't we? So I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit about Marijke.
So we've got Marijke joining us this morning, and she is a current chair of the scientific committee of the EBMT nurses group. She works as a haematology and transplant nurse in Ghent, in Belgium, and she's worked for more than a decade as a clinical nurse specialist, working in stem cell transplant. She really likes patient and family education and working with patient groups. She's also got some special interests in working with AYA, and she's also a board member of the Belgian Haematology Society since 2005. So she's got a really well-established profile and career in haematology and stem cell transplantation. And then she's just been with the scientific committee since 2019, but she's made a massive impact. And she took over as chair of scientific committee about 12 months ago. So she's a really fully fledged member of the scientific committee. Looking forward to
Yeah,
having
it's going to be great seeing Marijke again. It's if anyone remembers, she was on our podcast about the annual meeting from 2023 this year. And then I'm going to introduce you to Annika Kisch, who is a nurse who works through in Lund University Hospital in Sweden, working in inpatient and outpatient care as a stem cell transplant coordinator. And she's responsible for the accreditation work for JC at that hospital. She has completed a thesis on allogeneic stem cell transplantation, patients and sibling donors' perspectives, which is super interesting. She's been working as a research development and education leader in the same department at this hospital. So she's a little bit like me. She does a lot of education, nursing development and research, clinical work related to stem cell transplants. On top of that, Annika is also an associated professor at Lund University, where she teaches students there as well. She is a member of our Nurses Group Research Committee within EBMT, so along with Marijke. And since 2021, oh, excuse me, she is the chair of this committee, so a different committee, Nurses Group Research Committee, as opposed to Scientific Committee. So she's another chair of a committee, which is fantastic. We're going to have so much breadth of knowledge bringing to this podcast. It's going to be absolutely amazing. And I am one of those novices who hasn't really written any abstracts, so I am going to be furiously scribbling notes down as we speak to our guests today.
Yeah,
so
I think it's great to have the chairs of both the scientific and the research committee with us for this pod, because scientific committee members, they review all of the abstracts that get submitted for the nurses group, and that includes nurses and allied health professionals as well, who submit abstracts to the nurses track of the annual meeting. And Annika, who's specifically looking at research abstracts with the rest of the research committee. So they are, obviously have a lot of expertise, not only in writing abstracts, but also in reviewing abstracts. They know exactly what it is that we're looking for when we're judging, scoring, marking, and selecting abstracts. So yeah, it's going to be great.
I think it's going to be fantastic. Just before we actually bring our guests onto the pod, just a little reminder for our listeners at home. If you do have any topics or you have speaker suggestions for us, you can actually add those to the Spotify Q&A session if you're listening below the podcast, if you're listening via Spotify, or in the YouTube comments, or you can contact us via the other social media accounts. So please do, if you have anything you'd like to have us talk about, then we would be very, very happy to look into that and to get your suggestion up off the ground and onto this podcast. Okay, so I guess the next thing to do really is to bring on our guests. So I would like to extend a very warm welcome to our two guests. Thank you very much for joining us, Annika and Marijke. How are you both? Hope you're well.
Fine, thank you.
Not too nervous. So as is always our structure in the podcast, Michelle and I are going to alternate in asking questions to our guests. And we are going to start with you, Marijke, if that's okay. And I suppose the very, very first, very simple question for this podcast is, what is an abstract?
What is an abstract? We have a lot of, I'm a nurse, we have a lot of nurses, so I admit that nurses and abstracts, it's important, but it's not the first point of thinking if you were saying about nursing, but it's important. What is an abstract? An abstract is writing very short in a methodological way what you have done, if you have done some research, a study, a collaboration, you can put it in an abstract. So you have abstracts in nursing, in medicine, in different kinds, but write very clear, structured, it's in a structured manner that you can write a short overview. Normally it's not more than one page where you see in one liner the headlines. Just my idea of an abstract.
No, that sounds great. Sounds, I mean, it's a lot the same intimidating than a full paper as well, isn't it? So Michelle, I'll have your next question for you. So I'll hand you over to Michelle.
Yeah, I think that's, I just wanted to say, I think it's really interesting what you said about what is an abstract, because it is, isn't it? It's like a summary of something that you did, but there's often a framework for that. So you talked about that you follow a methodology for writing an abstract, and I think that's sometimes the thing that nurses find a little bit off-putting. It's the recipe the ingredients and getting the recipe and the ingredients right. So if you think of the recipe as being the guidelines and the ingredients being the things that go into making that abstract, so whether that be kind of the framework of an introduction, the methods, the results, and a conclusion, is a very basic abstract. But I really like the way that you described that as there being a methodology around abstract writing. And that's right. You know, we often give guidelines for abstract writing, whether you're writing for a paper or whether you're writing for a conference. There are always guidelines to follow, and those guidelines are the rules for that particular meeting, but they're also there to help you and offer guidance in how to write an abstract for that particular meeting. So why do you think, Marijke, that it's important that nurses produce abstracts or write abstracts?
It's very important, but some nurses have to do it beside their job, but it's really important that it's becoming a part of their job also. Like, that's so nice if we are going to EBMT. If you see the abstracts, then you say, oh, right. Oh, that's logical. We do it also. Or we could also have a team about this. And when you have to start to write an abstract in the beginning, when it's your first time, it's not always easy to start with an abstract. So my advice is, especially for the first time, I remembered the first time we wrote an abstract for EBMT, I did it together with a colleague, with the clinical nurse specialist from pediatrics, and she was my guide, and it went very well. So look for collaboration. Don't do it in your own, but in the beginning, also with nurses, but it could also be with doctors, with pharmacy, with so I think that's also an important ingredient. Collaboration. And another topic that's not always easy, time. Start in time. And we always have deadlines. We all know it, but that is something really important. Put it on your calendar to start beginning thinking for next EBMT, in not 1 week before, but already 1 year, a couple of months before, and then you have time to look for partners. I went through all of it, that you were too late to find partners and that you want to put in an abstract, but you know it's important for your quality. Start early, and that's why you have to be a little bit organized and put it on your agenda and look for somebody who can take you with you for the first time.
And I think the important thing, isn't it, is that abstracts provide an opportunity for nurses to showcase their work. And, you know, you're offering this summary, you're submitting that to a panel for a review, and you potentially get the opportunity to join a meeting, not as a delegate, but as an active participant, as part of faculty. And that's an important output from writing an abstract. I think they're important for your CV, you know, that you got the opportunity to present a poster or present an oral presentation, and also that professional confidence and development that you get as an opportunity from writing an abstract. Annika, I'm just going to ask you as well. Why do you think it's important that nurses write abstracts? Are there any other kind of aspects of abstract writing that kind of strike you as beneficial for nurses?
I think what you already said is very important, that it makes it, we make our work, our nursing work, visible. I mean, everybody can see it. We spread it. That's very important. But it's also for a personal development for the personal nurse. It can be a start of an academic career, and also you by starting writing abstract, you start of thinking in a more structured way, and you maybe start also to read other abstracts, and then you get interested and you get ideas about maybe studies you want to do, and then hopefully you get accepted to present your work at the conference. And when you do that, you're very nervous the first time, maybe also the 10th time, but you have the opportunity to meet other people who are interested in the same area, and you network, and that's so amazing. So there is a lot of opportunities that and doors that open.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's those hidden benefits, I think, sometimes, isn't it? So, you know, a bit of tricky work and making that extra time up front, you know, the potential benefits personally and professionally are actually quite extensive.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to hand over back to you now, Emma.
Brilliant. I mean, I'm listening aptly here again as a person who's never written an abstract, but thinking that isn't it such an important thing that nurses are given that voice, because we are such an important part of the multidisciplinary team, that our experiences are also extremely important to be shown. So I've got one more question for you, Marijke, before we move over to Annika, and then we'll come back together as we always do. So we talked about this being sort of a door opening into academia or academic writing. What can we do for our nurses to help them alleviate any worries or nerves that they have about writing in an academic way? What advice would you give a nurse who was worried about writing academically?
I can understand that in the beginning,
oh yes,
it's the first time that they say, okay, how will I do it? But we have also on the website, on EBMT, on the nurses website, we have a very nice overview what guidelines you have, how you have to write. But thing is to write very clear, to avoid unnecessary technical terms that may confuse readers. It's important to be in the head of somebody who didn't do the research or the study or the implementation project. Ask to read it by somebody else who is not in the study, and there if it's understandable. But it has to be written in an academic way, and that's for the first time. It's not always easy, but we have a lot of examples of abstracts. We have guidelines, but also if you read like the abstracts from last year or from other conferences, you can learn to read also other abstracts. And the most important, what is your message, and what will your reader, you have to take your reader with you through your implementation project, to your, that you say, oh yeah, that's nice, that's something new or something special, or so it's describing in an academic manner, but also you have to trigger your reader a little bit also. So it's both. It's not only academic, but it's to be very clear, structured, but also why our research is so important. Also to share our results, because we think it's very important also to sharing those things. And that's why those abstracts for EBMT are so useful for everybody, to read the abstracts, and then you say, oh, that could be nice for us, we can use it. Or also visible, as Annika said. I think that's also for other professionals. If you are working in teams, if you have an abstract, it's always a benefit also for your personal or your team spirit also. I remembered a lot of people say, oh no, we have nothing to put in an abstract, but if they think further, we have. Yeah. But it's important to have data or to have a method, but it's well described also in the manual. But before, you really have to thought, okay, do we have some project where we can make an abstract of it?
Amazing. Actually, yeah, every time I go to a meeting, I'm always furiously looking around at the abstracts and taking notes of the ones that I want to take back to my service area to pass on to my colleagues. So they were really good really good tips. People are probably watching me writing things down at the moment. That's hopefully everyone else is doing the same thing. Well, thank you very much, Marijke. We will move over to Annika at the moment, but we will come back. And you are obviously, we'll have some more questions for you later on. So I'll go over to Michelle for Annika's first official question, and then we'll take it from there.
Thanks, Emma. So, Annika, we're going to talk about top tips for abstract writing. What are your top tips for abstract writing?
Yeah, that's a bit tricky one, because you have to choose some. But I think that what Marijke said before is good tips, is that you plan it, you need time, and take help from experienced people to get some guidance. Those tips are really good. But then I want to add that, and you also said this in the beginning, Michelle, there are always guidelines. There are always guidelines. In this case, if you want to submit an abstract to EBMT, look at the EBMT guidelines for writing an abstract. But you can also submit abstracts to other conferences and read the guidelines and follow them. And that's really the basic. And then I would give a tip about the title, because the title is very important. You have to have it's good if you have an attractive title, because you have to always remember that you know your work, you know what you have written, but the readers and the reviewers, they don't know it. They don't know you, probably, and they don't know the work. So keep it interesting, and keep it like catchy, so you catch the reader and the reviewer already at the beginning when they read the title. Not too long, not too short. And then you can move on and give other tips. And one tip is that the background, keep it short. 1-2 sentences, it's enough. There is no space for a long background, and it's not necessary. Just to put the reader in the field. What is it? Very short. And then you have the objective, and the objective is like the most important part of the abstract. It has to be clear, and the reader has to find it immediately. Sometimes when you read and review abstracts, you have to read through the abstract several times to find the objective. That's not a good abstract. It has to be there, and it has to be very clear. Spend time to formulate the objective. That's very important. And then in an objective, do you always have, what do you say, action verbs, the verb you use for your study, if you have done a study. And the verb has to be carefully chosen. If it's a quantitative research or it's a qualitative research, you have different verbs that you usually use that are correct. So, for example, if you have a quantitative research, you can have verbs as assess or analyze, for example. If you have a qualitative research, you can have verbs as seeking and understanding, explore, and so forth. So this is really, really important. And then you have these parts that are always in the abstract. It's usually background with an objective, and then you have the methods. Keep that also very concise and comprehensive. It has to be clear what was the design of the study, what is the sample, what data collection was performed, and how was it analyzed, but short and very simple described. And then the result. The result has to answer the objective, nothing else. Because
that's great.
That's very important, because you have an objective and then the result answers the objective. And you can read that many times, that other things are described. And that's because usually you do your work and you have so much to tell. You think it's so interesting and you really want to let everybody know. But you have to answer the objective. That's the result. And then you have the conclusions, and they should be derived from the results, nothing else. And not also too much wishful thinking. Because sometimes you can read that. It's really, oh, well, this is going to change the world. I don't know, maybe not. That's maybe too big. And not also only more research is needed. Yeah, well, that's quite, doesn't say much. You have usually 500 words in an abstract. Select what words you use. A long answer.
I love that.
Great
I love
answer.
that, Annika. Thank you. I think the other thing that goes along, I actually really like the way you broke that down into the various sections as well. And I think the other thing that goes along with the wishful thinking is overstating, overclaiming what your piece of work is going to achieve. And then not providing the evidence that you achieved that. So, you know, the changing the world thing, well, that's fine if you're going to evidence that you've changed patients' lives with your intervention. But if you're not evidencing that, then that's an overstatement. The other thing I think that is making sure that the topic of your abstract is relevant to the meeting that you're submitting your abstract for. So if you're submitting an abstract for a cancer meeting, for instance, make sure that your abstract broadly covers a topic associated or directly approaches something to do with cancer, rather than orthopedics or cardiology, for instance. So if you're submitting an abstract for a transplant and cell therapy meeting, make sure that it is on the topic of transplant and cell therapy. And then I think be careful that you don't fall into the trap of if the meeting that you want to submit your work for is asking for a case study, because they want to include some really interesting cases within that meeting, then try not to submit a piece of work about your randomized controlled trial on nutrition or rehabilitation after transplant or something like that. Because if a meeting, if the abstracts are specifically looking for certain things, then that's exactly what they want to see within that. Marijke, did you have any other top tips?
I have a pencil, and Annika and Michelle, your tips were wonderful. So I'm also writing the tips down, and it has to be short. So Annika, you said it very well.
Thank you.
And also, Michelle, the topic has to cover, because conferences ask to have different conference topics. Also, EBMT has a lot of nursing topics to put an abstract, to write an abstract. But also there, it's really important to see that there's a good match. Is it about data management? Is it about quality care? Is it about donor care? So I think that's also an important topic. And another one, follow the guidelines. Don't put 300 words extra, because then you know that that's not the good guidelines. They are really strict. That's why they have guidelines. So that's also in the beginning, sometimes you could think, oh, it's not some extra words or sentences, but also there, follow the guidelines. And perhaps start in time, but also look for people who are working on the study, that afterwards or before there's no discussion about the authors, because also there it's important, okay, who wants to write with me or with the group on the abstract, who will be on it, that not the day before submitting people say, oh, I also want to be on the abstract, make it clear as in the beginning, okay, we will do this, okay, who will be interested in the study, okay, that you talk about those things from in the beginning and not at the end. I think that's typical that in a hospital that we see sometimes who wants to be on the abstract. So make it clear that everybody is happy and that they are proud to work together and not that there's a discussion afterwards.
I think also maybe asking colleagues, I think particularly if it's your very first time you wrote an abstract, or you are writing an abstract in English when English is not your first language, ask a colleague to peer review your abstract before you send it in, just to kind of sense check it, make sure that what you think you're conveying is what you've conveyed in your abstract, so it gets the best chance that you have. We've all worked pretty hard this year on creating some descriptions for the individual topics for the nurses' abstract submissions this year. So that helps to offer an additional layer of guidance around the various topics that we're looking to see abstracts in, or the category under which you might submit your abstract this year. So I hope that that's going to be quite helpful for people when they get round to submitting their abstracts, and do have a look at those before you get too far underway with writing your abstract as well, so that you're fairly clear around which category you're going to be submitting to.
And actually that leads extremely well onto our next question for Annika, which actually is, what topics should nurses consider looking at? I suppose we could talk a little bit about what we have already kind of laid out for annual meeting next year, but maybe if there's anything else, and I'll open up the floor to you, Annika, and you tell us.
I know what Annika's going to say. She's going to talk about research. No, you're not necessarily.
We love research.
We love research. No, but I completely agree with Michelle and Marijke what you say about topics, and also I think we can say it 100 of times. Read the guidelines, follow the guidelines, and read what is written, what is the main purpose of the conference. So you have a topic that suits, that is interesting for the conference. I think that's really basic. And then for nurses, I think, we should write about nursing and not try to, sometimes you see nurses try to write about almost lab things. That's not what we do. It should be some nursing issues, and that can be really a lot. That can be from patients' experiences, or family caregivers or relatives' experiences, or perceptions of something in the care, or their disease or treatment. But it can also be from nurses' perspective, from what maybe education needs, or education issues, or nurses' experiences from caring for patients with severe GVHD, for example. So you can have these different views, patients or relatives or nurses, and then you can go into specific, like you have maybe a special interest in nutrition, and you have performed a project, and you can describe that. And or you have, like I have, a special interest in donor issues, donor situation. It can be about that. So there is really a lot, patient needs, for example. But I think that also, like for the EBMT, it doesn't have to be a research that you write in your abstract. So again, read the guidelines, because for some conferences, it has to be a study. It has to be a research that is described in the abstract, and is then might be accepted for presentation. But for EBMT, we don't have that. It has to be a research. It can be like a case report, as you said before, Michelle, it can be a project, like a quality improvement project you have performed at your clinic, but you follow the same subheadings, you follow the same structure. So, I mean, you may have performed a project where you have changed the care of the patients from making it much more in the outward from the inward, and you can describe how was that done, how did you do that, and what was the objective with that project, and what was the result, and what was the background, very shortly. So there are a lot of possibilities, but it has to fit the conference, and it has to be well written and described. I don't know if that was a good answer.
No, it was a great answer. What I'm thinking is, like you were saying, nurses are experts in nursing. So talk about what you're an expert in, talk about what you're really experienced in, and what you know. Like you say, don't start talking about lab work. Well, that's not something that I'm an expert in, so I'm not going to talk about it. So that was a brilliant answer. I'm very much like Marijke with my pen, writing lots of things down. It's great.
Could I just add, because sometimes I think that nurses don't think that they have anything to present.
But we do.
Yeah. So if you just start, like, if you're a bit more experienced, you can like start listening and talking and being available, and then you can like find projects or cases that can be written down as an abstract.
Yeah.
But nurses in their daily work do not normally think about it as something possible. Oh yeah, I haven't done any research, I cannot write an abstract. Yes, you can.
Yeah, I think also they can talk to, more senior leaders within their department, whether that be nurses or physicians. Sometimes it doesn't feel particularly obvious where you might start if you haven't done a service development project or a quality improvement project, or you're not undertaking a piece of research. Then sometimes it doesn't feel, you want to do this. There's this thing inside you, you want to do it, but you just don't really know where to start. Do you have an idea? Is your idea good enough? Will your idea work in an abstract? I think the other thing that we're quite fortunate in terms of kind of ideas generating is that with JC, we're all part of quality management programs, and that quality process is ongoing through audit. So if you're really stuck for ideas of what to do, then talk to your quality manager and a quality team. You might want to pick up a short audit. There might be an audit that's already been done. You might be able to re-audit that. So the template's already there. You just need to recollect a little bit of data. And you will often get support for audit from your quality team because they like audits, because that's part of the ongoing quality process. And we also should like audits as nurses who want to be able to demonstrate that we are part of quality care and implementing best practice and standards for patients.
It's a great conversation. I'm sitting here surrounded by experts. It's fab. I guess, Michelle, you've got the next question for Annika anyway.
So this is about personal and career development and how abstracts can contribute to a nurse's personal or career development. We touched a little on this earlier, but it'd be good just to kind of recap on that again, if that's okay.
Yeah, we talked about that before, and I think that's it. As we said, it can be a start of an academic writing, and for the academic writing and an academic career. It can be because you learn while writing an abstract. You learn about the structure and the academic writing, and hopefully you have some support, and then you might become interested in this, but you haven't known that before, maybe that you were interested, and then when you come to a conference, you meet people in the same area and who are doing this. So this networking, I think it's so important, the network, and where you could maybe find a way to find grants for research, a way to find a supervisor because of the contact. So I think it's you start somewhere, and probably the first draft of your abstract is not very good. I remember mine; it was terrible, but you learn and you get some energy from it when you also have the possibility to tell other people about what you have done and what you're interested in. And one idea can give energy to another idea, and it can become something bigger. And then you can also take that back to your clinical work, where you can have a more confidence, and you can also have the sense that you make a better work, make the situation for the patients. You improve that. I don't know. That's really not exact answer, but I think everybody has to find their own way.
Yeah, I agree with you though, Annika. It's a kind of it's a cycle of professional development, isn't it? And personal growth. So, you're kind of, there's an element of risk in doing an abstract. So, you're putting something there, it's going to be judged. Unfortunately, that's the process. It's going to be marked. Nobody knows who submitted abstracts. Because everything's anonymized, but there's an element of risk because it's going to be scored by a panel, and you will get a score, and you might be offered something like an oral presentation, or you might be offered a poster, and very, very rarely your abstract might not be accepted, but that is very rare. It's not common, and if an abstract's not accepted for a meeting, then there have to be very justifiable and transparent reasons why that abstract's not been accepted. But there's that element of risk, and there's that element of success in doing that. So, if you have your abstract submitted, then there's that sense of achievement already. And then, of course, you get to go to the meeting, to be in the room, either sharing your poster or talking about your work, and having a formal discussion through a Q&A or an informal discussion with people who are in the room and catch you after your talk, or maybe over coffee, and you have those discussions. And there's that whole networking and practice sharing benefit that you get from doing that. It almost is immeasurable, the impact of that has on you personally and professionally. And I remember my very first abstract and presentation like it was yesterday, and I remember the whole process of actually feeling a little bit vulnerable at different stages throughout that process, because all of it was new for me. I hadn't done we made slide decks in those days that are not on a computer, but I had never done that before, and I hadn't written an abstract. I hadn't really traveled anywhere before, and I hadn't really got any great ambitions to do so, but there was something in me that I wanted to share the work that I was doing, and I felt actually duty bound to share that work on behalf of my department, because we were doing something at the time that wasn't really being done by a lot of transplant units then, and so there was something a little bit different about what we were doing in the piece of work that we've done. And so there was something about being able to share that work to potentially benefit other people that I hadn't really thought about, and being in the room, hearing all of the other work that other people were doing that I definitely benefited from. And, certainly in those days, I never, ever thought for a moment that first presentation might in some way lead to me having a role within the nurses group of the EBMT, and how I got here as president of the nurses group of the EBMT, but it's through those really small seeds that we develop that professional confidence and that professional credibility that enables us to take the bigger steps forward to do more things.
Yeah, I completely agree. Can I just add some comments?
Yes, please.
Yeah, first I would just like to comment on that you started with that very few abstracts are rejected, and that is because they don't follow the guidelines.
Yeah.
So it's simple, to be honest. It's follow the guidelines and you will probably not have your abstract rejected. That's really the case. And then also I was thinking about, but because we talked about before how to alleviate nervousness about writing an abstract, is also about nervousness about being nervous to present. And there you have different aspects. I mean, you are native English speakers, but that's something that is really a big obstacle for some of us who are not native English speaker. But if you can start thinking of it as a practice, and also that, well, I'm not native English speaker, and I'm not, and that's, everybody knows, and that's fine. It's not perfect, but it's fine. I make myself understandable. So if I can just try to relax on that. But when you're not native English speaker, you have to prepare yourself a little bit more when you do your presentation, because when I have a presentation in Swedish, it's completely different, my preparation phase, or if I have it in English. And everybody is not used to speak in front of people to do that. But to alleviate nervousness when speaking in front of people, a tip is to think that you know your work, you know what you have done. If you say something that is a little bit wrong, it doesn't really matter, because nobody else knows. You know your work, and you have something interesting to tell others. So I think that's, if you could boost yourself with like energy and power to do the presentation, think about, that's what my physician at my department told me when I was going to do my first presentation at EBMT conference, and I was so nervous, and they said, you know it, the rest do not know it.
And it was very good.
Annika, it's something that is very often heard from others, and also I remember you are the expert. Believe in your topic. Don't say, oh, it's a nursing topic, or it's something about I don't know, a topic that's not so well known. Believe in your topic. It's something important, and know your audience. So I think that's also an important one. Who is sitting before you? Who's your audience? So I think some great suggestions. Can I just say one thing?
Yes, please.
So, at the hospital, we have a lot of students also. They do their lifelong learning is now for nurses at the hematology ward, stem cell wards, very important. So they have to do sometimes also some improvement projects. They write final dissertations, but sometimes they don't think about. They bring it in the ward itself, but also there it's important that we senior, as Michelle said, that senior nurses, nurse managers help people to bring it out, to make it visible, because also for other professions, it's important to see what we are doing. So it's a little bit our duty to provide abstracts, I think.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that idea that it's a duty to pass on that knowledge to other people. I think that's a really good way of putting it. Thanks to, well, all three of you put it that way, really, haven't you? So thank you for that little nugget in my brain. So the next thing we do on the podcast, we affectionately call it the Quickfire Round. And essentially what we do is we're going to ask you three questions. Both of you will answer. And we just need like a really short sentence, 1 sentence, 2 sentence answer. Just super quick. First thing that comes to maybe to your mind. So we'll start with you, Annika, if that's okay. And we're going to say, what are 2 things you should avoid when writing an abstract?
I have to choose 2 things.
I'm afraid I'm only letting you have 2.
Okay. Do not write an unclear objective.
Great.
And do not include too much wishful thinking.
Love that. Love that. And Marijke, what about yourself? What are 2 things to avoid?
Don't start too late with your abstract. Be in time, be prepared. And as a second one, look for mentors, look for experts who can help you. So
yeah,
don't work
alone if you don't really know how to approach this.
There's Michelle's answer for guys who are wondering.
No, I was just kind of turning around what Marijke had said. That wasn't the original answer. I just copied.
Bolstered each other. Well, Michelle's got the second question, which actually kind of almost links to some of those answers. So go for it, Michelle.
So who should nurses ask for proofreading? We talked a little bit about, get somebody to peer review your abstract before you submit it. Who should they ask, Marijke, to do that?
I think it's important that you know the topic. So at your center, you also know who is the expert about that topic, and you are a nurse, so you have you see it from the side of a nurse. So I think look at expert. That can be another nurse, a senior nurse, or a doctor, and they can provide you with valuable feedback with some things that you haven't thought about it. So, and also the first time you feel a little bit vulnerable because, would it be okay? All right. But it's like this. Don't be too shy and go for it. Ask their opinion.
Yeah, thank you. And Annika?
I would say that go for a nurse with experience of writing abstracts. I think that's the most important. And it can be good that they have knowledge about the subject, but it's not always necessary, because sometimes it's good that somebody who has not the specific knowledge can understand the abstract. Because if somebody who has an experience from writing academic abstracts and reading these, that if they don't understand your message, then it's not a good abstract. So you can make it both. You could have not only one person looking at your abstract, but don't ask too many, because you will have too many opinions.
Yeah,
it's a great Annika. Sorry, it's a great because it's nice to have it read also by somebody who's not. If you are too close to the topic area, then sometimes you are like. So that's thank you. Also for me, I have my pencil.
I have had dietitians in our department ask me to review abstracts for them previously. The topic is around transplantation, but obviously the interventions are nutritional interventions, which I'm obviously not an expert on, and I think that they've found that helpful.
I'm sure they did.
previously.
I'm sure they did.
And also, if you're submitting your abstract for a nurse's program, then it is good to have a nurse peer review from a nurse who has some experience with abstract writing, because again, they're going to help you to ensure that the nursing messages from those abstracts, or the care messages from those abstracts, come through.
Nice.
Yeah.
Love these answers, guys. I think they're brilliant. One final quick fire round question before we close off the podcast. So let's start with Marijke. What's one thing you wish you'd known before you wrote your first abstract?
Follow the guidelines, but really the guidelines, it's really nice written down, but the first time you think, oh, it's not like, make that your message is clear, but in the beginning you say, oh, okay, for me it's clear, but you have a lot of advice. But I think that's the guidelines, follow the guidelines.
Yeah.
Methodology, there has to be something. Don't think that you can put something else. So stay with your abstract guidelines. It's simple, but I think it's so simple that people forget.
Yeah.
Or I forgot, I have to admit.
And Annika, what about yourself?
Well, it's in line what you said, Marijke, but I would also like to add that I missed a complete understanding. When I was writing my first abstract, I missed the complete understanding of the meaning of each subheading. Because I didn't really understand, even if it was written in the guidelines, that what's supposed to be there under each of the subheadings. What is background? I think we need to talk about it. What is background?
Yeah.
What is result? I just supervised some of my nurses college before the last annual meeting, and they had a good project, and they had written a draft of an abstract, but it was in wrong places. They had written the methods in the background and like that, because, and I remember I missed that. I didn't really understand.
Yeah.
So I wish I had understood, and maybe had that conversation with somebody explaining the guidelines, because it's not only to read them, you have to understand them.
Yeah. And yeah, absolutely. Michelle, would you add anything to that?
No, I think it goes back to that kind of recipe idea, really, isn't it? And you need to make sure that you put the right ingredients in the recipe at the right time to get the finished product out. And that's what it is. You know, there's that methodology around writing an abstract. You know, certain things, words, descriptors go in certain places. The format for most abstracts is pretty much the same, but the nuances are slightly different. You might have an aim and introduction combined, rather than just an introduction or background. But essentially the format is the same for the majority of abstracts. So yeah, I completely agree. And yeah, get that there are, it can be hard to know which bits go into which of those subheadings when you write your first abstract. That's part of the journey, right?
Yeah.
What a great topic we've discussed today. I guess all we've got left to do really is to say thank you so much to Annika and Marijke for joining us today, and for giving us your expert views on writing abstracts and what nurses can do. And I'm hoping lots of nurses are furiously writing notes and thinking, maybe I could write an abstract, and they can. So thank you very much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to do this podcast with you today.
Thanks a lot for being invited.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much again, both of you. Thanks again, Emma.
Thank you. Wow, how great was that podcast, Michelle? I have so many notes. I have so many things to say and so many things to think about for the future. I loved it. Thank you.
So yeah, I think I hope people tune into this one and are not put off by the fact that this is essentially a podcast to help support people showcasing their work, because they might think that the topic is a little bit dry, but actually we've just had the most amazing discussion. And you know, whenever you open up a topic like this, it's a bit of a process of discovery, really, isn't it? And we have, you know, kind of covered the topic back to front, inside out, and really talked about the things that you don't necessarily get to, bless you, the opportunity to talk about when you're putting an abstract together, because you're generally heads down and trying to get through the process. But I think that people will find that this has been incredibly useful. Well, I certainly hope so. So we look forward to getting the feedback anyway. But you've written some really nice summary notes, and
I have written
over to you.
I would say they're summary notes, but they're probably me going away now thinking about what kind of abstract I could write and present, or hope to potentially present in the future. So as you say, like, it could have been what people might think is a dry topic, but when you think and you break it down, like you said, we're talking about using a framework to write a short methodological presentation of something that the nurses are an expert in, because they're the ones that have done the work. And you don't have to go out and do it all by yourself and hope that it's correct, because most places have some kind of guidelines. And certainly for annual meeting 2024, if anybody's submitting, it's the best place to go to is the EBMT website, because the guidelines for abstracts for EBMT are right there for you to use. Some of the take-home messages.
I just want to add, Emma, that nurses talk in frameworks all the time, because when they're in their clinical practice, they're using frameworks all the time. So this is not new for them. It's just a slightly different framework than they would be used to,
with their name at the top of it, which is really important. So Marijke and Annika gave us some really good tips, actually. I felt that things like writing clearly, looking at other people's works for inspirations and how they wrote things and examples, really importantly thinking about what is actually your message for your abstract. So don't lose sight of that. Super helpful top tips: planning it, making sure you're doing it well in advance, so you've got a good amount of time to go back over it if changes are needed to be made. Use other people as a resource for help, because if someone else has already written an abstract, somebody will have already written one. There are hundreds out there. So use the help from other people. Your title is important. It needs to grab your reader. You want them to look at your abstract, maybe over the abstract next door, but keeping the background short, things like that. And really importantly, the fact that the results really need to answer the aim that you said at the very beginning of your abstract. We don't need, things to be wishful thinking necessarily. We want to say this was our aim and our results showed that. And that's all within that abstract. Don't overstate things. Just put that information out there in a well-constructed way, which again, you can do via the guidelines on the EBMT website. So what we would really love is to see some abstracts starting to come about. They're opening up shortly to allow people to do so, and they'll close by the end of the year, in time for them to be reviewed and hopefully organised for EBMT 2024 in Glasgow, which is my neighbour city. So you will all see me there. I will be there. If anybody, as I always say at the end of these podcasts, has a particular topic, and we said at the beginning, please get in touch. Please let us know. We want to see what you want to learn about, because we will probably want to learn about it too, right, Michelle? We love learning. That's
absolutely. You're absolutely right. And I actually think that the abstract site will be open by the time this podcast airs.
It should be. It's opening up very soon.
They will already have looked at the guidelines and hopefully check out this pod to give yourself a little bit more information to support those the guidelines reading that everybody is going to be doing.
All over it. It's just going to check if you've already started your abstract. You listen to this podcast to check that you're doing things the way that you would be able to do, but that you would need to do in order for your abstract to be accepted.
Yeah.
And it's really nice.
If you've already done your project, then and you think, oh no, 3 months, that's not enough time for me to write an abstract. Of course it's enough time to write an abstract. Yes, you need to plan your abstract, but it's 500 words.
Yes.
You've done your project. All you need is some help and support to be able to get that down in the framework, using the guidelines, and get it put together.
So the message is, yes, you can do it. Please do it. Give us even more evidence of our contributions as nurses to the body of work that is stem cell transplants, isn't it, really? So on that note, I think we're going to say goodbye from this abstract from this podcast. I've got abstracts on the brain, guys. And we're going to say goodbye from this podcast. Thank you very much for everyone that's listening. Thank you to you, Michelle, for joining me once again as my co-host. I love doing these podcasts. It's the highlight of my month, if I'm honest. Love it.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you to you. It's been a great one. So yeah, echo again. Get your abstracts in, all the topics around transplant and cell therapy nursing, and a few other bits in between. So check out the topic categories and get the abstracts in. And Emma, I look forward to the next one.
It's going to be great. Thanks very much to the background team from EBMT for doing all of the wonderful technical work as well. And thank you again for listening, and we will see you next time.